Hello, I'm Cynthia Rosnoy, curator at the Mattituck Museum. I welcome you to In the Studio, a three-part series beginning today that provides you with a behind-the-scenes workplace tour of three exciting artist studios. We come to you today through Zoom. This process allows you to ask questions during our talk. We invite you to use the Q&A feature on Zoom. If you hit the Q&A box, you will be able to type in a question, which we will answer at the end of our program. If for any reason you're having a hard time with that, you are also welcome to use the chat feature to send a message to the panelist. The Mattituck Director of Development and also our Zoom expert, Cindy Tolosa, is acting as moderator for us today. Thanks very much. And she'll be controlling that for us. Now, I'm very excited about this brainstorm project of Bob's because what it does is allow us to see the artist's work's process. To an outside observer, the creation of the work can seem almost a magical process. The artist dreams up a concept and then seemingly transforms it from the ether into an inspired, tangible object. But while that object can seem effortless when seen in its finished form, it is in fact the product of trial and error, honed skills, experience, and in many cases, significant physical exertion, all taking place in the private laboratory that is the artist's studio. In today's In the Studio Zoom outing, we visit Eric Forstmann's Torrington, Connecticut workplace to learn about his artistic process. I'm happy to say that we've known Eric for many years and happy that he's the first one to start off this wonderful series. Eric's art celebrates images of the everyday in his still life paintings and in his realist landscapes. He finds brilliance in conventional subjects, painting ordinary objects that appear so real that we feel we want to get out and touch them. Scale varies in Eric's work. Some still life paintings are just the size of a page. Some of his landscapes stretch to 6 feet. His art reflects its time and responds to his place as he makes numerous references to contemporary life. Eric's a busy, celebrated artist with many successful one-person shows under his belt, including the fabulous Audience Pleaser that we presented at the Mattituck in 2013. Eric, thank you for sharing your studio with us today. It's good to see you again and to have Bob there behind the camera. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Cindy. It's great to be here. I wanted to thank all the people in the greater Waterbury area, and I think in 4 or 5 different states that may be watching. But yeah, hi.
Well, let's start off with, if you don't mind, just telling us first about your studio. Is it an old space, a new space? How did you make this work for you?
Well, it's a brand new space, and I had been looking in Torrington. I've been working above the 5 Points Gallery for the last 4 or 5 years, and thought I would try to find something on the ground floor, but staying in Torrington because I really like the aspect of going to work, which I hadn't done for 30 years. So this was a automobile upholstery shop that we've converted into 2 separate spaces, one sort of a gallery apartment space that clients can come and see things the way they work with furniture, or I can sleep here. And then a second half, the studio half, where all of the work gets done, quote unquote, the magic happens.
Right, right. And was the space raw space when you first went to it?
Yeah, it was just an open room. And we didn't do all that much to it, but the small things that we did to change it just really transformed the space into a really, really good workable. I've only been here for a month because of COVID and everything else. And I was out west for 90 days, but yeah, it's a great space.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, if you don't mind, let's start, because I'm sure everyone like me is curious to know what you're standing in front of there. Is this new work, an older work? Tell us titles, tell us what you're up to here.
Well, the title of this painting, I believe, is They Were Really Quite Busy at One Time. This is a long title. And this is a section of a wall from a building on Water Street in Torrington, old print shop. And all of the Huzzarai and evidence of their endeavor was all over the wall. And I just chose this section of it to just kind of concentrate on and look at the kind of what was of a business in America.
And Eric, I talk about your landscapes, I talk about your still lives. In a way, this work seems to reflect both interests. We have those trempeloid objects, the electrical outlet box, and yet the wall seems to give an expanse we'd expect in a landscape. Is this something new that you're doing?
Well, it's just terribly interesting to me the different ways that time can create a pattern. In this case, in a business or on this wall, but I was looking more toward abstraction when I was thinking about when I was working on it, because it has some nice elements. This is kind of a section here. It could almost be something clearly non-objective, but no, it really was just something that occurred to me having walked through these old rooms before they started holes in them. I just kind of wanted to capture it.
The other thing that attracts me to this piece, which I'm just seeing for the first time, is your continued interest in shadow. For instance, the shadow behind the outlet there, and the way the cord, the electrical cord with the pieces of tape, is shadowed beneath it. This is something that's a long-term interest of yours?
Yeah, I think any still life painter, anybody who eyeballs things is very in tune to it, trying to capture a time of day and light as accurately as possible, because light is what informs all of us and everything. So if you can get a handle on it, it's probably a good idea.
Well, as we're talking, in fact, light is really part of your art, but it's also part of the process. So that your studio, do you have good light? Do you go there morning, night, afternoon? What kind of atmospheric effects in the workplace affect you?
Well, I go to as early as possible to the studio and stay there as long as possible. I love it. This new spot has skylights, which are a tremendous boon to the way you see your work and the way the work is lit. Because it's from above, it's a little bit unusual, but it's very effective.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and yeah, light is really the bottom line.
Right. Now this work, now we're looking at landscapes with a big sky. One of the things I remember about your landscapes is that they're of this area, aren't they? Are they up, the Litchfield County area?
Yeah, most of them are not so far from here. My fascination with the minutiae of the world leads me to not go so far away from home to find subject matter. And this is a farm that I passed as a child on the school bus just about every day when I was living in the Lake Warramog area, and just always stuck with me. And I was driving one day, just kind of meandering, and saw it again and remembered it and decided to just come back and do a piece.
I love the big sky, but I don't remember, or I don't think of you as a big sky person. Is that some new investigation?
No, but I do think that the sky is the thing that everybody needs to pay a lot of attention to, whether it's global warming or basically sitting down and looking at the greatest show on earth. It never hurts.
Mm-hmm. The viewers are now, just like me, getting a real sense of the studio space. You have some relaxing area there. Are you the type who comes into the studio and you're going to sit down with your pad and pencil, or is this a space where you meditate on what you've accomplished?
Well, wouldn't that be nice? But no, but yeah, it definitely can be that. It can be a meditational spot. Like I said, it's only a month old, so I haven't really utilized it to its full extent yet. But I do like the fact that there's an organized, neat space, and then there's where I work, which is this new. It's pretty neat by comparison to my previous studio, but you'll see what I mean.
So this space can be utilized, and perhaps it is already, or will be, once this topsy-turvy time is over, as a gallery space so that people coming to see your art have this finished space to visit.
Exactly. And as it happened, the COVID situation is probably going to favor only small groups anyway. So it seems kind of timely, and hopefully it'll work that way.
You know, I see one of my favorite paintings there, the one with the silver and the silver container with the fruit on the white napery. That is just such a stunning piece. Can you tell us when you did that? Tell us the whole story behind here.
Well, again, I tend to work in these long series so that I can, secretly have something to do if I run out of ideas. But this is another version of a enlarged, slightly enlarged fruit still life, kind of unconventional. No real narrative to the setup. Just it was interesting to me, and I love the way it reflects the window to the left. And the leaves and curled kind of objects, the way they catch the light is also was very attractive.
For this piece particularly, but we can enlarge the discussion in a little bit. Did you set up a still life? Did you take a white cloth, put it over a table, and then set these objects in this way?
Oh, yes, absolutely. This is an ugly seckel pear from a tree that's in Sharon. And I set up just about everything. I call myself an eyeball realist. I try not to use photography. I think there's an extra measure of perception you get from looking at the actual things, even if sometimes it's a little less accurate than photorealism.
What's your next step? After you've established the still life that you're going to do, are you then working with paper and pencil? Are you going directly to canvas? What's the process there?
It's funny. A lot of artists do have a concerted drawing, sketching habit or lead up to a painting, but I had a lot of kids, 4 kids, and they were small when I was really developing my studio practice. So I learned to do a lot of drawing in my head, believe it or not, and the drawing that's underneath the painting is quite extraordinary, but it's the one that nobody will ever see.
Oh.
So yeah, that's the way it goes. And I do a lot of my work on the back of my eyelids. As funny as that is.
Oh, wow. What a skill.
Absolutely.
What a skill. Well, it's really a nice correspondence now to go to the piece that I see to your right, further in the room, the large silver picture. We're talking about really a change in scale here.
Right. Yeah, part of that enlarged series, but this one has my former studio on Water Street, which had some lovely big north windows, and sort of invited this enlarged kind of meditation on me, which is, what else do you want to meditate on? Yeah, here's the scale. That's me, but I look a little more like my brother Ken, but that's all right. And this is Water Street, and I just love the way that the object has such, curvilinear rhythm to it. So I just figured it was worth a try.
Well, it's quite beautiful, but let's just hesitate here for a minute, because there's a couple things that I think are characteristic, unique to your art, and that is this fabulous handling of reflection. And we get that many ways here. Is it something that, as you're painting, you're developing that, or is it something you're already coming to the canvas saying, I'm going to do this here or there?
Well, I think reflections are, there was a famous early Renaissance painting that I think kind of set everybody up. It was the marriage of Arnold. I forget the actual title of the name, but
oh, I know which piece.
Yeah, and the way that reflected the entire activity in the room, and the way that especially curved objects can talk. It's a thing in front of you, but it's talking about everything behind you. And the way that it encapsulates the world of you, or the world of the object, I think is very engrossing, and I think it really does attract people, kind of like crows.
The other key element here is the self-portrait. In effect, even though it's a reflection, the self-portrait is part of your work here.
Yeah, it is. It's a way that I can put me, and I'm not too obtrusive, but it does end up something that people look for, so it becomes a feature that I didn't really intend on in the beginning. But it's pretty effective. But like I said, it wasn't my idea. I think it's been effective for a very long time. I just try to turn my slant to it.
Ah, well, it's fabulous, and the way you use slant just makes me think about how you compose. That's a very strong composition. Now, this is after what, 2018, because these are just spectacular, but not what someone who only knows your earlier work might expect.
Right. Well, I've been thinking a lot about weather and environment really most of my life, but the last few years it seemed more prescient. So I've been doing these kind of threatening, foreboding kind of landscapes. There may be a little hope in the right-hand corner there. But if you look closely, that's good. This is actually a flood, and it's called high water. People say, "Oh, it's so beautiful," and they look at it and they think they're not looking at the reflections of the telephone poles, where only the top 5 feet are showing. So there's a lot of houses and things under the water. So it's kind of like a beautiful moment in disaster.
Well,
there can be such a thing.
It's quite lush. When I think of your other works and being so precise, this seems looser. You're painting differently, at least in the top half of this canvas. I wish the viewers could see the telephone poles, because I suspect they're as detailed as your still lives are.
Well, they're noticeable, but you're right that when I paint landscape, I tend to paint with my arm fully stretched. When I paint still life, I'm definitely about 8 inches from the canvas. So there's a desire to get back, because most people's experience in a landscape is standing back and looking. So I want to get that feeling that you're not in it so much as looking out and into it.
And you identified, I think, something that small glow of light at the right as being hopeful.
Yeah, it could be. It also could be getting covered up by what's happening, the maelstrom. So it depends on your point of view, I guess, and that's when the viewer becomes much more important than the creator.
Well, they, in Duchamp's words, complete the work, right? Right.
Absolutely.
The does, yeah. Now this is a large piece. What is this? About 48 inches tall? 48, 36?
No, probably. I think it's more like about almost 6 feet tall.
Ah, that must be so wonderful firsthand. And I love the way the light in the cloud is coming out. So these environmentally inspired works, is that a whole series that you're in the process of?
Kind of. I mean, they just, I don't want to overdo it. And I don't want to become kind of a soapbox screamer, but like I said, it's been something I've always thought about. And when something occurs to me that I feel I can convey that message or make people feel that way, then I will do it.
And again, the composition is so strong. I love how that slope seems to be the definitive line.
It's actually a mountain in Kent, and that's the Housatonic, quite considerably overrun. There was a big ice dam several years ago where the whole Kent was on CNN and the Weather Channel because they were being threatened. And so that was what gave me the kind of initiative to do the painting.
Great, great. Well, now the camera is panning over to one of your tabletop still lives, where we see a massing of green apples. I think that must be similar to the series we saw that when we began. And I'd like to know if this is something that you feel is no longer part of what your output is. Is this something that you've left behind?
No, I don't leave anything behind. I have, moments when you have to rely on something. It was like the other day when I restarted painting after this, I had to go to an old familiar spot to get my center again, and it was really worth that time. And this is just like I said, a continued member of the slightly enlarged fruit series. And It does harken back to things I did back in the 90s, but like I said, don't leave an old friend behind.
Right, if it works, right, right. And now that I've seen that great landscape you were just looking at, I'm looking at the more painterly background behind the apples and seeing that it is softer than, it really gives a nice contrast to the sharpness of the apple delineation.
Yeah, I like concentrating on the way the light comes in and out of those. It's a very small area that people don't get that much of an opportunity to get down and, kind of be in here. So that's another reason why I do these bigger things, because they force you into a way of looking at something that you probably haven't experienced that much. I mean, obviously Zoom photography or whatever, but yeah, that's what I like.
And now the space that we're in, which is a gallery-like setting, does that allow you to do any of your painting there, or do you do your work? Do you take it?
I'm definitely going to use this room and this window and the very extreme light that it offers. I just haven't quite worked out the best time of day and because a cloudy day will give me a much different result than a sunny day. Morning, afternoon, they're all different. But it's what's great about having a new space is you can explore just the space for a while, and it's perfectly legal. Nobody's going to go out and do anything important. You don't have to Rembrandt it up. You just can go ahead and work it out. And if you do that, I think you set yourself up for a much more successful space. If you take the
I'd like to ask about the piece that's directly behind you, just above the desk, because here again we have that big wide sky, but it's almost an empty. The emptiness brings you into it. It's sort of isn't what I expect, and yet it's almost inspired by a Thomas Cole Oxbow or something like that.
Definitely, there's a heightened sense of light that happens at that time of the day when things start to rake and shadows become bigger and more prominent. And this is just a spot above Lake Warramok down in New Preston that I just have loved my whole life. This is called Bates Hill, or Tanner Hill, I guess it's an official name. But out overlooking that deep space down in New Milford, and this is over where Hopkins Inn is. Anyway, it's the method of bringing you into this painting, I think, is these receding clouds and how it disappears into the pinks that atmosphere gives you. Yeah. And this kind of bigger cloud that kind of pushes you down and forces you out.
Yeah. And then right next to it, one of my favorite motifs of yours is the shirt.
Yes.
Oh, there's a single shirt. I don't know if I've seen a single shirt. I've always seen a couple or several.
Well, there's been a couple of single shirts over the years. Everybody does get lonely from time to time. But yeah, it's something about them. I don't do them too much, maybe 2, maybe 3 a year. But it's a subject that never seems to fail because of their human quality, the similarity to kind of stances and postures that people take. And they're relaxed, to say the least. I mean, there's never an attempt to pretty any of them up or iron them. It's just part of how life presents itself, and this very common object that virtually everybody has some experience with.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's sort of a stand-in for you in a way, or at least a figure for sure. Right. Now, this is an interesting work, and maybe it's because the shadow allows you to do this, but this is white on white and must have been a very difficult process.
Yeah, it is. I mean, as everybody knows, there is no white. Really, the white, pure white is hardly ever used. It's almost always some kind of tint or angle, and this goes in and out of a lot of cool colors without very much warm at all. And I still think it's effective, and it also, I think, adds to that sense of aloneness, that it's not warm and happy necessarily.
Eric, what pieces have we looked at or still to look at are the amongst the oldest that you have on view there, and then the ones that are most recently painted on view there?
I would say the wall piece we talked about first was probably the oldest one. That was from about 4 years ago.
Uh-huh.
And most of them are from pretty much 2018 on. I think this is 19, 18. Yeah, I've been very fortunate in that I don't keep a huge amount of inventory around. That's how I'm still able to keep my house.
That's good. That's good. And tell me, sometimes, even though I don't know any of the titles right now, sometimes your titles were a little cryptic. For instance, the still life behind you, just to your left, what is the title of that?
Well, this one doesn't actually, it was called Story Table, but then the story kind of lost its significance. So the title of it could be, why don't you give me a title, Cindy, real quick?
Oh, jeez.
Big piece of it all the way down to Palm Beach, and then it was too big to fit in the space we had planned for it, and it actually has never been seen by anybody until this very day.
Just move the door a little bit so there's a shadow.
There we go. Yeah, yeah.
But again, it's not a narrative. I'm interested in objects for their own sake. They don't have to necessarily have a dialogue between or special meanings. Just things on a table that are interesting. That's about as far as I get with the complication.
Eric,
Does that?
Yeah. Now, I know you studied at the Boston Museum School of Art and must have seen tremendous masterpieces in American trompe l'oeil. Is that what made you, is that an instigation to your choice of the subject matter, or how did this all happen for you?
Well, it's since I was a kid, I tried to draw things accurately, and I don't think I ever got over it. And yeah, there was Harnet's, there were some incredible paintings in the museum. And I just always have found value in respecting what I see and hoping that everybody else kind of agrees that it's worth seeing. I don't know how else to explain what and why I do. I just, once I started to try to do things accurately, you realize pretty quickly that that's a road you're going to travel for the rest of your life. Because it's hard won.
Sure, sure. So the objects we've been looking at are pretty much common, everyday objects. Are there any items, maybe not in this studio yet, but items that are inspirational to you that you will be bringing into the studio?
No, I don't have a lot of. I have tolerance for a great amount of different things. I spend a lot of time at the dump, which is where most of the objects I come from. They don't have all that much, let's say, individualized personal meaning. They're just they're things that work well together. They have a rhythm. They have you'll see on these shelves that I'm doing in the next room that they're. My choice in the objects has more to do with how they work together than their individual meanings.
Yeah, let's see this.
Okay.
So,
Is this a request from the audience?
yes.
Oh, cool. So this piece here, just very quickly, is I believe it's the world's only folding painting.
Folding what?
Folding painting. See, it folds up for travel. Just kidding. Yeah. No, but you can hang in the corner, and I don't think there's any other paintings in the world that are corner pieces. I have never seen one. I probably just killed myself showing it because I don't have a proprietary patent on this particular. But I just thought it was a whole lot of fun. It was part of a series I did that was, how would we react if we hadn't had television? What we would have done to paintings to make them, a little more interesting. Broadly accepted, etc. And I had a bunch of different takes on that concept, and this is one of them. This is my favorite. This is the Smithfield Valley in New York, which I think is one of the most beautiful single valleys anywhere in the Northeast, and maybe in the country. It just has an intimacy and a beauty, and obviously a set of greens that you really can't you can't match anywhere. So
Yeah, you've captured that there, and I do think you should put patent pending on it. Yes.
yeah, well, I may do that just to protect myself.
That could be the title.
You have everybody's name here, right? It just pops up.
So there's another space in the studio to see?
Yes, we are about to see the actual workroom. Nicely done, Bob. So this is the new studio. We kind of pan. I'm going to use the camera a little bit. I want to just pan around here and look and see the various stations. You better do that. I'm
Okay.
screw it up. One of the things I asked for in the beginning was these skylights, which I think they give just a really good overhead working light, which is very important, but also the light on subjects is without cast shadows. It's without, has a very much a object-centric kind of way of lighting things.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm very pleased with them. They're already working out great. I'm doing this painting here. We're kind of capturing an Instagram feed from the gallery. I don't know if anybody knows about that, but you should. It's gripping television. But so anyway, and this is the piece I've been working on. Here's the shelf, the setup. As you can see, it's all here. And this is where I am so far with the painting.
Oh, stunning, stunning.
Now this thing.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Cindy.
I was going to say, I even remember that the fabulously large setup you put in our gallery, and you're painting what you see, right? You really don't change colors or anything like that?
No, like I said, I have a respect for the actual. And I think that as innocuous as it may be, that everything deserves that attention from me, but from me alone. And I wanted to show you this thing. Another patent. This is called the pay attentioner device. You put it, pay attention only here, and then I'll lower that as we go. Just a little technical thing for everybody to take home with them.
Now tell me, do you recycle these objects? Will they go into a trunk or a cupboard, and 2 years from now you'll use them differently, but they're still there?
Oh yeah, and this series there's about 40 or 50 objects that I've been rotating for several years, different patterns, different arrangements of, glass and metal and ceramic, the three basic hard items in still life, and just, again, like the shirts, it doesn't get tiring. It's one of those things that kind of relentlessly gives a serious challenge and a lot of satisfaction when you're done.
And do you, if I remember correctly, even construct the cases or the boxes that they're displayed in?
Yeah, I'm amazed they're still holding the flyweight that they're holding, because I am one of the Earth's worst carpenters. My brother was over at my house last weekend. We had a giant maple tree fall down. He was taking some chunks of wood, and he happened to see some of my handiwork. And the look he gave me was one that only an older brother can give a younger brother. It was brutal.
Oh.
But I'm too impatient with the way I build. But I do build those. I build the boxes for the little box arrangements, and so that I can kind of have control over that.
Sure, sure. Now I see a small landscape behind us, but I think to the left, to your left, there was a larger one. Here, this is Armenia?
Well, actually, I wish it was Armenia, because that's a big mountain. But this is in Johnson, Vermont.
Oh.
I was invited to take part in the Vermont Studio Center's residency program last spring.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah, and I went for 2 months, and this is a piece I did out on Route 15, looking into Johnson itself and toward the mountains of Vermont and behind. And it's just a little slice of northern New England. Could be anywhere almost, but it is in fact Johnson.
Well, I'm going to remind you of the painting from the behind the eyeball statement, and maybe I'm just curious to know, were you painting on plein air at all, or you were able to?
This is absolutely, I really do almost everything. This painting here was also in Vermont. It was like 11 degrees out that day and blowing. Yeah, I love the experience of being outdoors. It kind of gives credence to the whole, you know, it's not exactly like a blue collar activity painting. So I feel like if you're out there battling with bugs and weather and things like that, you're kind of like, it gives like an essence of toughness to you. You're pretty much
do people ever come up to you and want to critique the work? You know, say this is that, yeah.
Not critique so much, but they're you know, it was one of the things I taught myself to get over early on was the onlooker that comes up, because you can't get spooked by them, because even if the thing's in the beginning, you just kind of have to work. But it also forces you to get to the bottom of something as quickly as possible. So when they do come, they know that's a house and not, you know, something from your aunt's closet. You know, so it's important and super important when you're painting, say, a 3-hour stretch of time. This was like 2 to 5 in the afternoon. And so you have to get that time in there, and you have to be very diligent about leaving when the time has passed, because if you stay there, you'll start adding things and wondering what was wrong with you. What has really happened is the light is advanced and you're doing things that don't belong in the painting. So the experience of plein air painting, not only is it nice for that, but the people that come up tell you stuff about their towns and about their lives that are really stunning. It's like you're a therapist. And, you know, they say things you can't believe, and you just have to say, okay, go on, you know, just let them continue. And they do. And it was something that I had no idea how much I would enjoy, because before they leave, they feed you full of tons of compliments. So that always is like, you know, okay, your payments received. And, but yeah, no, it is really, really nice to commute with people. You know, again, I never thought that would be something I would be that excited about.
So a couple of the words that we've just mentioned, discipline, you know, that's something that you learned when you had to get out there and put that stuff on the canvas right away. Where does discipline and then the pleasure of creating art meet? Is that a 50-50 split, or is it more discipline and less pleasure? What is that for you?
Cindy, I think discipline is pleasure. I mean, I'm not, that all of a sudden sounds like something out of a, you know, horror movie or something. But no, I think when you realize what your rhythm is, when you realize what it takes to make you feel like you've done a day's work, you know, it just makes you feel good when you're done. And I think that is, you know, discipline and pleasure can be one and the same.
Well, we see those two works in process. Do you have others in mind, or is the work for you something that, well, you work in series, so maybe you do anticipate ahead?
Possibly. This shelf piece was something that helped me get into this studio and get cracking right away, because like I said, I don't have a lot of time to waste. Nobody does. So that's a familiar thing, something I knew about the basic technique and the methodology behind it, so that helps. But I'm always thinking of something. I have a big canvas up here that was a really good idea. It's no longer. We sent that idea off to the morgue, and but it'll stay up there for a while. We'll see. I mean, I think it actually might go vertical and be something else. I don't know. But I try not to put too much pressure on that stuff. It does kind of come on its own most of the time, so you don't want to force it too much, because if you do, the paintings show and you will own them for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Plenty of them on that shelf.
Now, when you're working, are you listening to music? Is there something that you use as something to make that flow come easier?
Yeah, I always listen to the radio or CDs. You know, to date myself or to show what a Luddite I am, and I actually have a considerable amount of compact discs that I still use. It's a terrible collection, but I do, because I like it just to go and go and go. I don't want to have to choose things. So 6 or 8 discs in a row is good, or just the radio blaring on is definitely something I like to have.
Yeah, yeah. You don't use studio assistants, as far as I know.
No, I'm too annoying for that.
And that's a mirror. There you are again. Okay, got it. So so the piece that we just looked at, the large canvas that wasn't going to be finished, will that size of the canvas direct you in any way?
Yeah, it will. I mean, it's I'm trying to figure out the direction that I should take with it, but it'll reveal itself. And if it doesn't, then I'll just, I can roll it up and try again.
Yeah.
There's a tendency when you start something new, I think, with everybody, to maybe overreach at first, and I had this terrific idea, and I was like, wow, I'm going to break in the studio like Blockbuster. And it turned out to be a lot like Blockbuster Video. It just sort of So,
yeah. And I guess the other thing I'd like to ask, and I think people would be curious to know, is what do you do when you're not painting?
Sleep. No, I do ski from time to time. My 4 children, I have 2 grandchildren. I would like them to be around anytime. I have a house that demands a lot of attention. I give it very little. So I don't know. I really love painting, and I really feel like when I was in Vermont on that 2-month stint, I was afraid that I might find out that I really didn't have what it took to work in that situation for 2 months straight. And it was just the opposite, and really discovered that this is something I think I was really meant to do, or at least I think I'm meant to do it. So, yeah, that's where I am.
Yeah. And now I'm going to end with a fantasy question. Are you ready?
Yes.
What famous artist from art history would you like to spend a day with, and why?
Famous artist. Boy, that's something. I should have prepared for that one. Well, I've always loved, and it could be any number of artists. It could be probably 30 or 40 different people from history. I think it would have been interesting to be in the Cedar Bar and taking a punch from de Kooning or something. But Edward Hopper has always been a very big influence on me because of his accessibility and the simplicity of his mark making and the really great communicative skill he had. But he was a difficult guy, and from what I've heard and read, he was a bit like a loner, kind of like me. But we had his Josephine with him, who was he tortured, and I just would love to talk to that person and find out what made him tick, and what and why his work continues to be influential and filmic and so yeah, I would spending a day with him, whether he liked me or not, I think I would.
Yeah, he is known as you described. I remember one quote. Josephine, who was half his size, he was a big fella, would consider him a rock, and she was the mosquito that fluttered around him. But she too had some pull, because after they were married, she was the only female that served as his model. So I'd like to be a guest at that day that you spend with him and learn about it.
No,
I'd like to be a guest at your studio sometime. It looks beautiful. Thanks for inviting us in.
Well, thank you so much. It's great to have everybody in here, and you're always welcome. 79 Wall Street, Torrington, Connecticut.
And do you have social media that people can follow you there?
There's a rumor that Eric Forstmann will have an Instagram of his own someday when he grows up. But for the moment, you can go to Eckerd Fine Art, and I actually have several progressions of that shelf painting. It's kind of fast motion things. They're a little comical, but that you can access, I think, through the website.
Great. And then, of course, as people are getting out and about sometime in the next months or so, they can visit the Eckert Fine Art Gallery in Kent.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's there too, right?
Yeah, at 12 Old Barn Road in Kent, Connecticut.
Beautiful.
It's a great spot, and we look
yeah.
forward to seeing you real soon.
Good, good. Now I see that there are some questions that I'm going to ask Cindy to help us with. Are you there, Cindy?
I am. So I'll start with the first one that came in when you were talking about the painting that you did in Vermont. So where is your next landscape painting destination?
It will be in somewhere in Litchfield County or Dutchess County, New York. I can't say for sure, but what happens with landscape is when I'm driving around, which everybody does too much, I see things that occur to me, and if I'm thinking of them at the end of the day, I'll go back. So that's as accurate as I can get on that question.
Great. And then do you paint in oil paint right out of the tube, or do you mix it yourself?
Well, it is out of the tube. I wish I had time to get powdered pigments and go through all that stuff, because I understand it's a level of control that's really beneficial if you're that kind of a diligent individual. However, I love the art supply store, and yeah, favor Windsor Newton and Old Holland oil.
Good, good, good.
There's a chat question.
Yep. Is there anything you have found impossible to paint?
Oh, good question.
I can do human beings. I can make people look very much like their cousin. I'm accurate and capable, but when it comes to a portrait, I think a portrait painting is something that you probably should spend your whole life doing, because it's incredibly difficult to get likeness. I'll up to that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So we have a question here from someone, from Kathy Mann. We have a custom designed piece of Eric's art. How often do you do totally custom work?
Whenever people ask. No.
Taking orders today.
Yes. 888. 1-800-ARTISE. No, yeah, I will do commission work. I prefer to just come up with things on my own, as any writer or painter or craftsperson would. But no, I have no problem with commissions from time to time.
Cindy, that leads me to just ask Eric about the shirt paintings, because I know some of them have ended up with great names behind them. That I think you donated them for one of President Clinton's causes or something.
George Stephanopoulos from Good Morning America has one. Kevin Bacon has one.
Yeah.
There's the guy that started. Anyway, there's a bunch of them. I should have had that list along. But yeah, I've been very, very fortunate in the people that have come in and bought my things. Warren Beatty has a painting of still life, but not a shirt piece. So yeah, they've gone pretty far spread, and I think I've done about 70 of them, and there's only one left. So
wow, nice.
There was a question, do you only paint on canvas, or do you paint on other surfaces?
I rarely paint on canvas, actually. The bigger things that you saw, that big still life or landscape over the bed, and the big still life over to the left here, those are done on canvas because of the extreme weight of masonite. But for everything else, I use masonite panel. It's a very inexpensive but stable, and to me, very predictable surface that I love.
Great. So I'm going to allow somebody, the name on the screen here is AP Film 1. It looks like they want to ask a question out loud. So you should be able to ask your question now.
Yeah, Eric, it's Karen Arthur. I am so enjoying this. I'm so enjoying seeing your new home. And I just want to say that the interview has been stunning, because it's so honest, and you are so honest in life, and it reminds me of your work. You're equally honest in your work, and You know, I'm a fan.
Oh, I can't tell you how much
you.
that means to
Thank
me.
you.
Well, let me then conclude, I
We agree.
suppose. Yeah, conclude by saying that we support what Miss Arthur just commented on. It's been a pleasure because you do share and you are open. We see it in your personality, we see it in your art. Thank you so much, Eric, for welcoming us into your studio. We look
Do we
forward to
have a
seeing you
minute
again
for
soon.
one more question that we
Oh,
Sure.
sure.
So how many hours per day do you paint?
At least 10
Wow.
every day
Yeah.
too. I'm really obsessive with that, and it's I had a long period off in the beginning of the year this year, and longer than any other time, and it was tough. I mean, I really was wondering how I'd get back into it because I really felt rusty. So I enjoyed enough to do it constantly, pretty much.
Even when you had to use left hand.
Even when I had to use my left hand, I should have showed you. That's a whole other story.
Ah.
I was going to come back and we're going to talk about injuries I've had.
When we're allowed to be together.
Right.
And we can
right.
wine at the same time.
Exactly.
Good, good.